In 1987, researchers collected hormone data from thousands of men. The results were exactly what they expected. Healthy young men had healthy testosterone levels. Nothing unusual, nothing alarming, nothing that suggested a crisis was coming. Then something happened. Years passed, technology advanced, society changed, the world became richer, more comfortable, more connected, more convenient. By almost every measurable standard, life was improving. Then researchers looked at the data again, and what they found made no sense. A healthy man in his 20s today often showed lower testosterone levels than a healthy man of the same age decades earlier. At first, researchers assumed there had to be a mistake. The numbers didn't fit the story. Human evolution doesn't move that fast. The male body couldn't have changed dramatically within a few decades. Yet the evidence kept appearing, study after study, year after year, country after country. The same disturbing signal emerged. Something was changing men, and nobody knew exactly why. That was the beginning of the mystery. But the mystery became even stranger when researchers started asking a simple question. What exactly had changed? Because the male body hadn't changed, not significantly. Human genetics were nearly identical. Human biology remained largely the same. So if the men hadn't changed, then perhaps the environment had. And that's when the investigation began. Imagine two men. One grows up in 1970, the other grows up today. Same age, same height, same weight, same genetics, yet they live in completely different worlds. The first man wakes up to sunlight, the second wakes up to notifications. The first spends more time moving, the second spends more time sitting. The first experiences boredom, the second experiences constant stimulation. The first lives in a world that demands attention, the second lives in a world competing for it. And while those differences seem small, they may have changed everything. The deeper scientists looked, the more disturbing the picture became. Because testosterone wasn't the only thing changing. Energy was changing. Focus was changing. Motivation was changing. Confidence was changing. Even the way men experienced ambition seemed different. Millions of men were reporting the same symptoms: constant fatigue, brain fog, low motivation, poor focus, reduced drive, lack of enthusiasm. At first glance, these problems appeared unrelated. But what if they weren't? What if they were all connected? And what if testosterone wasn't actually the problem? What if it was merely the warning sign, the symptom, the alarm, the body's way of saying something is wrong? Researchers began looking for suspects. The first suspect seemed obvious: food. And honestly, food looked guilty. Walk through any supermarket. Almost everything is designed to grab attention. Bright packaging, artificial flavors, engineered cravings, products created to maximize consumption. For most of human history, food came from nature. Today, much of it comes from factories. Researchers suspected modern diets might explain everything: rising obesity, metabolic dysfunction, poor nutrition. The case seemed straightforward until the evidence created a problem. Even after accounting for body weight differences, the decline remained. Food explained part of the mystery, but not all of it. The investigation continued. The next suspect was sleep, and this suspect looked even more convincing. For thousands of years, humans followed nature's schedule. Darkness arrived, people slept. Simple. Then electricity changed everything. For the first time in history, humans could ignore darkness, stay awake, work longer, consume more entertainment, scroll endlessly. And modern men did exactly that, night after night, year after year. Many people spend enough time in bed, yet still wake up exhausted. Because recovery isn't measured by hours alone, it's measured by quality. And quality sleep has become increasingly rare. Researchers discovered that poor sleep influences nearly every biological system in the body: energy, recovery, mood, motivation, hormones, everything. Once again, it looked like the mystery was solved until the numbers refused to cooperate. Sleep explained part of the decline, but not enough. The pattern remained. Something bigger was happening. And that's when researchers discovered a clue nobody expected: attention. Not intelligence, not education, not genetics, attention. The modern world had become the first environment in human history specifically designed to compete for human focus. Every app wanted attention. Every notification wanted attention. Every platform wanted attention. Every company wanted attention. Human attention had become one of the most valuable resources on Earth. Entire industries were now fighting for it, and many experts began wondering what happens when the human brain receives more stimulation in a single day than previous generations experienced in an entire week. Nobody knew, because history had never run this experiment before. The smartphone was only a few years old. Social media was new. Infinite scrolling was new. Constant stimulation was new. Human biology was ancient. Technology was modern. And those two forces had suddenly collided. For the first time, researchers began asking a dangerous question. What if the problem wasn't testosterone? What if the problem was modern life itself? At first, the idea sounded ridiculous. How could convenience be harmful? How could comfort be harmful? How could technology be harmful? After all, these things were supposed to improve life. But then researchers noticed something strange. The more comfortable life became, the less resilient many people seemed to feel. The more connected people became, the lonelier many reported feeling. The more entertained people became, the less fulfilled they often felt. Something didn't add up, and the deeper investigators looked, the stranger the story became. Because the next suspect would completely change the conversation, not just about testosterone, but about modern men themselves. And when researchers finally identified it, everything started making sense. The next suspect wasn't food, it wasn't sleep, it wasn't stress, and it wasn't social media. It was something far more dangerous, something hiding in plain sight, something so normal that almost nobody questioned it. Comfort. For most of human history, survival required effort. If you wanted food, you worked. If you wanted shelter, you built it. If you wanted warmth, you gathered resources. Life demanded action. Every day, every season, every year. The human body evolved inside that environment. An environment where movement wasn't exercise, movement was survival. But within just a few generations, everything changed. Food arrived at the press of a button. Transportation required almost no effort. Entertainment became unlimited. Comfort became the default setting of civilization. At first, this seemed like progress, and in many ways it was. People lived longer, worked less physically demanding jobs, had access to technologies their ancestors could never imagine. Yet researchers noticed something strange. The more comfortable society became, the more exhausted many people seemed to feel. The more convenience increased, the more motivation appeared to decline. The relationship didn't make sense until scientists began looking at a concept known as adaptation. The body adapts to whatever environment it experiences repeatedly, always, without exception. Lift weights consistently, you become stronger. Practice a skill daily, you improve. Remain inactive long enough, the body adapts to inactivity. The human system doesn't judge, it responds. That realization changed everything, because suddenly researchers began asking, what happens when an entire generation grows up in an environment that minimizes physical challenge? The answer wasn't immediately obvious, but the clues started appearing everywhere. The average person today walks dramatically less than previous generations, spends more time sitting, more time indoors, more time staring at screens, less time exposed to natural sunlight, less time physically active, less time experiencing genuine discomfort, and perhaps most importantly, less time being challenged. At first, these changes seem harmless. After all, what's wrong with convenience? Nothing. Until convenience becomes a replacement for effort. That's when problems begin. Because challenge is not the enemy of growth. Challenge is the source of growth. Without challenge, there is no adaptation. Without adaptation, there is no progress. Without progress, there is no development. And for the first time, researchers started considering a disturbing possibility. What if modern men weren't suffering from a hormone problem? What if they were suffering from an environment problem? The hidden experiment. Imagine the largest experiment in human history. An experiment involving hundreds of millions of people. No control group, no supervision, no clear understanding of the long-term consequences. The experiment begins. People move less, sleep less, consume more processed foods, spend more time indoors, receive more stimulation, experience more distraction, and become increasingly dependent on technology. Then, Everyone waits. Years pass, decades pass, and slowly the results begin appearing. Not all at once, not dramatically, quietly. A little less focus, a little less energy, a little less motivation, a little less drive. Nothing severe enough to trigger panic, just enough to become noticeable. The problem was that nobody connected the dots because the changes happened gradually. One generation inherited a lifestyle slightly different than the previous one. Then another generation inherited an even more extreme version, and another, until eventually the environment became so normal that people stopped questioning it. Yet researchers kept finding clues. One of the most surprising involved attention itself. Because attention isn't just a mental resource. Attention determines behavior, and behavior determines outcomes. Think about the average day. How many times does a notification interrupt concentration? How many times does a phone pull attention away from meaningful work? How many times does instant entertainment replace effort? Researchers discovered something fascinating. The human brain loves novelty. It loves stimulation. It loves rewards. And modern technology provides those rewards constantly. Every swipe, every like, every message, every short video. Tiny rewards, tiny bursts of satisfaction, tiny dopamine spikes, again and again, hour after hour, day after day. The result? Many people became accustomed to constant stimulation. And when the brain becomes accustomed to constant stimulation, ordinary life starts feeling less rewarding. Work feels harder, patience feels harder, discipline feels harder, focus feels harder. Not because people are weaker, because the environment is different. The rules have changed. And suddenly the testosterone mystery began looking very different. Maybe the issue wasn't testosterone at all. Maybe testosterone was simply reflecting something deeper. Something happening beneath the surface. Something happening to the way modern men live. The clue that changed everything. Then came another discovery, one that made researchers rethink the entire conversation. Young men weren't merely reporting lower physical performance. They were reporting lower ambition, lower drive, lower motivation, lower purpose. At first, scientists struggled with this. How do you measure ambition? How do you measure purpose? How do you measure hunger for achievement? You can't easily place those qualities inside a laboratory. But millions of men described the same feeling. They weren't physically broken. They simply felt disconnected. Disconnected from goals, disconnected from meaning, disconnected from purpose. And that observation led to a shocking realization. Maybe modern life had accidentally removed many of the challenges that once created meaning. Think about previous generations. Life was harder, objectively harder. Yet many people possessed an extraordinary sense of purpose. They were needed by their families, needed by their communities, needed by their work, needed by their responsibilities. Purpose wasn't something they searched for. Purpose was built into survival. Today, many men face a different reality. Unlimited entertainment, unlimited distraction, unlimited comfort, yet increasing dissatisfaction. Why? Because humans were never designed to find fulfillment through consumption alone. Consumption entertains. Creation fulfills. Consumption distracts. Creation builds. Consumption passes time. Creation gives time meaning. And suddenly, the investigation reached a turning point. Researchers were no longer investigating a health problem. They were investigating a lifestyle problem. And the deeper they looked, the more obvious it became. The decline wasn't being caused by one villain. It wasn't food alone. It wasn't sleep alone. It wasn't stress alone. It wasn't technology alone. It was the interaction of all of them together. A modern environment producing modern consequences. And once that realization appeared, the biggest question of all emerged. If modern life helped create the problem, could understanding modern life help solve it? The answer would completely change the story, because the final discovery wasn't about decline, it was about recovery. And that's where everything becomes interesting. For decades, researchers searched for a single culprit, a single answer, a single villain, something simple, something obvious, something they could point to and say, that's the problem. But the deeper they investigated, the more frustrating the mystery became. Every suspect looked guilty. Food, sleep, stress, technology, inactivity, distraction. Yet none of them explained everything. Then researchers realized something important. They had been asking the wrong question. The question was never, what is causing testosterone decline? The real question was, what kind of environment produces testosterone decline? That single shift changed everything, because suddenly the focus moved away from hormones and toward lifestyle, toward behavior, toward environment, toward modern living itself. And once researchers looked through that lens, the pieces started falling into place. The modern male body wasn't broken, it was adapting. Adapting to an environment unlike any environment in human history. An environment filled with convenience, filled with stimulation, filled with distraction, filled with comfort. The body wasn't malfunctioning. It was responding, just as it always had, just as biology always does. The human body is an adaptation machine. Place it in one environment, it changes. Place it in another, it changes again. The body follows signals, and modern life sends signals every second of every day. Move less, sit more, sleep later, consume more, focus less, scroll more, seek comfort, avoid discomfort, repeat, repeat, repeat. And eventually the body adapts to those signals. Not because it's weak, because that's what bodies do. Then came perhaps the most important discovery of all. The same system that adapts negatively can adapt positively. The same biology that responds to poor environments can respond to better ones. This changes everything. Because suddenly the story is no longer about decline, it's about control. Most people hear the word testosterone and immediately think about supplements, treatments, quick fixes, magic solutions. But researchers kept returning to the same conclusion. The most powerful influences were often the simplest: movement, recovery, sleep, nutrition, purpose, challenge, human connection. These weren't new discoveries. In fact, they were ancient, which is what made them so fascinating. The future of male health wasn't hidden inside some secret formula. It was hidden inside principles humans had followed for thousands of years. Principles modern life often encourages people to ignore. The grandparent test. Imagine taking your grandfather from age 25 and placing him beside a modern 25-year-old. What differences would you notice? Perhaps your grandfather walked more before breakfast than many people walk all day. Perhaps he spent more time outdoors in a week than some people spend outdoors in a month. Perhaps he experienced boredom regularly. Perhaps he wasn't surrounded by constant entertainment. Perhaps his responsibilities arrived earlier. Perhaps his purpose arrived earlier. Life was harder, but life was also more demanding. And demand creates adaptation. Adaptation creates growth. Growth creates capability. Capability creates confidence. Confidence creates momentum. Momentum creates purpose. Purpose creates resilience. The cycle feeds itself. And perhaps that's what many modern men are missing. Not testosterone, not motivation, not confidence, the cycle itself. The crisis nobody talks about. What if the real crisis isn't hormonal? What if it's psychological? Think about it. Never before in human history have so many people had access to so much entertainment, yet attention spans continue shrinking. Never before have people been more connected, yet loneliness remains widespread. Never before have people enjoyed more comfort, yet anxiety continues increasing. Something doesn't add up. The promise was simple: more comfort equals more happiness. But reality appears more complicated. Because humans don't merely need comfort, they need meaning, challenge, growth, purpose, progress. Without those things, something important begins to fade. Not immediately, gradually, almost invisibly. The desire to strive, the willingness to struggle, the excitement of pursuing something difficult. And once that disappears, everything changes. The turning point. Imagine two futures. In the first future, nothing changes. Distractions become stronger, comfort becomes easier, attention becomes more fragmented. People drift, years pass, potential remains unrealized, strength remains undeveloped. Life happens by default, not by design. Now imagine a second future. A man understands the game. He understands that modern life is competing for his attention. He understands that attention shapes behavior. Behavior shapes biology. Biology shapes outcomes. So he starts making different decisions, not dramatic decisions, daily decisions. He protects his sleep, protects his focus, moves his body, builds meaningful goals, spends less time consuming, spends more time creating. Slowly, something changes. Energy returns, confidence returns, momentum returns. Not because of magic, because of adaptation. The same force that once worked against him now begins working for him. The final lesson. Perhaps the biggest mistake modern men make is believing that strength happens automatically. It doesn't. It never has. Every strong civilization understood this. Every successful athlete understands this. Every great leader understands this. Strength is built repeatedly, patiently, deliberately, day after day. The body follows habits. The mind follows attention. The future follows choices. And that's why this story matters, because the testosterone mystery was never really about testosterone. It was about understanding the invisible forces shaping modern men, the forces influencing energy, motivation, confidence, discipline, purpose. And once you see those forces, you can no longer pretend they don't exist. The climax. Maybe the biggest threat to modern men was never low testosterone. Maybe it wasn't processed food. Maybe it wasn't social media. Maybe it wasn't stress. Maybe the biggest threat was a lifestyle that slowly convinced men that weakness was normal, that exhaustion was normal, that distraction was normal, that drifting through life was normal. Because once people accept decline as normal, they stop fighting it. And that's where the real danger begins. Not when strength disappears, but when people stop believing strength is possible. The legacy. One day, future generations will look back at this era. The age of smartphones, the age of algorithms, the age of convenience, the age of unlimited stimulation. And they will ask a simple question. When life became easier, did men become stronger or weaker? The answer will not be found in scientific papers. It will not be found in statistics. It will be found in choices, millions of choices made every single day. Because every habit is a vote. Every action is a vote. Every decision is a vote. A vote for the person you are becoming. The body follows what you repeatedly do. The mind follows what you repeatedly consume. The future follows what you repeatedly choose. And perhaps that is the real lesson behind the testosterone mystery. The modern world influences men, but it does not control them. The final decision still belongs to the individual, because strength is not inherited, it is built. Health is not automatic, it is earned. Purpose is not discovered, it is created. And the future of men will not be decided by technology. It will be decided by whether they choose comfort or strength.